All right, another Sachem conversation. I'm Chris Vaccaro, joined by Bill Kropp, Sachem alum, Sachem coach, Sachem educator, and legendary volleyball coaching figure for all these years. And we're going to talk about his life and career. And I'm just excited that you're here to chat and join me today.
I couldn't be more thrilled. The work you do is amazing, and as a former history teacher, to go through the other interviews you did, it's better than anything, because it's my life, it's my past. Growing up, the people that you've already done, from Fred Frizaro, Tom Sabatel, Risa Zander, and then a contemporary, class of '77, Alex Young. So it's just wonderful, and you do the best work.
Well, thank you. And as I say every episode, the purpose is oral history. It's the history lived and made by people like yourself who have impacted thousands of students and athletes. And that impact has had a direct correlation on the view of our community. People view it from, yes, a sports perspective, but just what's going on inside the school community, which I think is the most important thing. And I would argue with anybody. I think our school community is very different than most because it's so big, because it's so many towns. And so the Oral History Project is meant to document both visually, audibly, based on the audio that I'm also recording, and then writing out the text of the transcription to make sure that it's all saved and documented and placed in the Sachem Public Library. After each year, I'll roll these over and put all those hard drives and printed files in the Long Island History Room. And I'll give a copy to the libraries at Sachem North and Sachem East as well. This way it's there for decades, centuries, however long this place exists. So I always like to start off, it's very A to Z. It's very linear. People see volleyball, they see coaching wins, they see Hall of Fame inductions. But who are you as a young man growing up? Were you born in the Sachem community? Where were your parents from? How did it all start?
Well, I spent my whole life in the Sachem district, except after I retired. I moved out to Manorville, but my both parents are from Brooklyn. They moved out here to Farmingville when I was born. My older brother, had the Brooklyn experience for 2 years, but we moved to Farmingville, and life growing up was not easy, in the sense that my father, had cancer, and when I was 6, 7, 8, he was in the hospital a lot, and when I was 9, he passed away. So my mom, single mom back in those days, just a high school education with a 11, 9, 7, 6, and 4-year-old, 5 kids. It was tough. But it was what it was, and I didn't know any different. But we got along. But there was great people who helped me through this. And when it came to role models or sports, my neighbor, who was my best friend at the time, Jimmy Doolin, and his brother Ernie, and his dad, they kind of took me under their wing, and we'd play football and basketball and baseball, and it was that was my intro to sports, because my mom, she didn't know, and then trying to make ends meet with 5 kids, that wasn't happening in an easy way that she had time. So that and SIAC basketball, that was my connection to sports. So
and where does volleyball start to come in? Did that ever exist when you were a young kid, or that was later on?
Absolutely not. What happened is, I will give a Sachem phys ed teacher, Andy Royland, who was the varsity coach when I was a senior in high school. Married Tim Clouds, the basketball coach, and when I see them, it's just wonderful. She tried. She tried to teach me a little bit, but what did I know? So I went to New Paltz, and I ran cross country for a great coach, Joe Keller. And every Sunday we'd have to wake up. He'd put us in the back of his pickup truck, and we'd go up to the mountains, and we'd run 15 miles and some crazy thing like that. And then one day I was walking through the gym, and they were playing volleyball. And I'm like, well, what's that? And it's like, oh, it's the varsity volleyball team. I'm like, we have a varsity volleyball team. So the next semester, I took the coach's course, and then tried out and made it. As there wasn't any volleyball, and as a 6'4" athletic person, I did well. And then when I graduated and got a job at Sachem, I was a JV girls coach the first year, and then there was still no boys volleyball, and I started the Sachem program in '89. So
Yeah. So, I've seen the pictures of you from high school. You ran cross country. It looks like, some of the yearbook pictures, and very fit, svelte Bill Kropp back in the the mid to late '70s there. And so, yeah, it's interesting. It's one of those things where it just wasn't necessarily an opportunity, but you gravitated towards it based on coaching, and that has been your identity for 40 years or so. But still, growing up in Sachem, what was that like in the '70s, where there's just enrollment starting to bustle at the seams? We start to get to this. At the time, I asked Alex Young this too, class of '77. Did you see those late '70s years as this just incredible group of people that were destined for success then? Because when I look back at it, '77 is one of the premier years. The success, literally, we're talking county executives, business CEOs, doctors, lawyers, teachers, coaches that lasted decades. It's amazing, the success. Did you feel that? What was the impetus for all that at the time?
yes, I will say yes, I did feel that, and it's because, and again, nobody gets where they are without other people helping them along the way, and people who are role models. And I wanted to coach at an early age, and my coaches, cross country and track, Tom Toscano, who is wonderful, who, if he's not in the Sachem Hall of Fame, should be, just an outstanding human and coach and great athlete, and Kevin Spellman. Kevin Spellman was another wonderful track coach. But with them and the role models they were, how could you not see what was there? Whether it was Fred Vaccaro in football, Jack Mahoney in wrestling, Reese Zander in girls basketball, Frank Schmidt, and then the founding father, Don Woolley. And I got to experience all them and see what they had as programs, and the respect and the pride. And then when I came in, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be like them. I wanted to be, in different ways. I knew I could never be a Fred Vaccaro. Fred Vaccaro, he's his own person. It's not my personality. But the respect and the pride, and you talk to any former Sachem football player, what they'll do is they will still say, "Coach." Yeah, I saw Coach the other day. I saw Coach the other day. And they might have been out for 40 years. And he just has that gravitas that he is, the guy. And then you have a guy like Frank Schmidt, who's passionate and is like the ultimate teacher, and is just a guy that you can't help but to gravitate to and just love. Reese Zander helped me when my first year coaching. She sat me down and tried to help me plan out a practice, and how to break it up and what to do again. And she's a legend. And she took me in, this 22-year-old kid who, is who was I, to walk along these great people. So it was just an amazing thing, an amazing time to be at Sachem, because Bill Batewell, baseball. There's just so many, Rick Mercurial lacrosse, and then they all had programs. And it's not a team, it's not a season, it's a career. It was just a wonderful time to be at Sachem.
At what point in your high school career did you say, I want to go to college and study education and become a Sachem teacher? Was it, a certain moment? Was it a certain influential person like many of the people you're referencing? Where did that switch flip and you say, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life?
I mean, I don't know. It was my junior year. I was on the track and I was talking to Kevin Spellman. We were doing a workout, and I said, I want to coach with you. I want to teach. And he was like, absolutely. I think you'd be a great coach. And when I went to New Paltz, didn't go exactly the way I planned. Let's say guidance had a little mix up. I wanted to be a phys ed teacher. And when I got there, they're like, we have a phys ed department. You could take phys ed classes, but we don't have a phys ed major for teaching. And then I really wanted to be an art teacher. And they said, well, where's your portfolio? I said, all my stuff is home. And they're like, well, you can't take classes. So long story short, a history teacher, which I'm very happy. I'm so happy and glad that was my path. A divine intervention got me where I needed to be.
Right. It all worked out. Everything happens for a reason. Whenever more and more I have these conversations, and I already knew this before I started this project, but it's become very clear. Walter Dunham, Dave Rothenberg, the whole administrative crew really did a service for generations and decades of Sachem by looking for the right people to hire, especially in the 60s, early 70s, the people who you had the fortune of taking as teachers. Did you have interactions with those type of gentlemen that helped, the builders of the district? Did you have any conversations with them? And do you see that impression of they hired people that were meant to build this thing and have it last, versus many districts and communities today, it's just a quick treadmill and cycle. They're not worried about building. It's just matter of fact, which and I'm not saying that's any specific community, but I just think it's a different time period. And when you're building something with that type of foresight, it becomes special, and that's very difficult to replicate again. So did you have any interaction with Dunham and Rothenberg? And do you have a sort of historic comment based on they really hire the right people for the right reasons?
Oh, every name you mentioned. And then that's why I think I was very lucky to be gone through Sachem the years that I did. Walter Dunham was such a nice and caring guy. Like, again, I'm young. I'm a couple years in, and he would just talk to me. He would just take a genuine interest. When I was in high school, I was student government president, and doing stuff for the school district. He would come and support us. And again, just he was Sachem, and he had a vision, and the vision he created happened. And that's why, again, everybody who walks the halls of Sachem should know his name. And David Rothenberg, same thing. I didn't, because Tom Sabatel was taking over a lot of the duties at that time. And the mid 70s, early 70s, I've met him, I talked to him, a very nice man. But as far as Walter Dunham, I just, again, visionary, the idea that, between him, I think it was, I was listening to Tom Sabatel's interview with Berger, and buying all this land and having the foresight to create what Sachem is. Again, just a great person.
Yeah. And you eventually start coaching volleyball, like you said, late 80s. So we'll want to shift into, a bit of your philosophy, your strategy and tactics, and your volleyball chops. Where did you build your foundational principles as a coach? Was it something that, I'm sure it evolved, but you had to start somewhere? And where was the volleyball mentorship? Where was the, you're not looking for Fred Vaccaro necessarily for volleyball X's and O's, but you had all these other great coaches in the building to see how they built programs. So did you use them as I know the answer is yes, but did you use them as the inspiration to build your program and legacy? But who was giving you the volleyball chops to make you really a skilled tactician in that way?
Again, just in the right place and at the right time. I mean, my first year, 81, I did coach. I started very first semester coaching cross country, 9th grade. And then I went to coach the JV in the spring of '82. I did that for 3 years. And then I moved on. I was an assistant at Stony Brook University under Terry Tiso. She was wonderful. She was one of my mentors. Also, it was women coaches who coach the girls volleyball program in Suffolk. They took me in, and it was wonderful. The best advice I got from Ann Dingham, who was the Hills athletic director and coach, she said, "You're not going to be a good coach until you take your sneakers off. Okay, you're not a player. You're a coach. Your job is to observe, teach, correct." She was wonderful. Maura Stouter, who I later opened a camp with in Connecticut and on Long Island, she was another one who just helped me along. There was Fran Califer, who coached at Hofstra. I would do her camp every year. I would do Terry Tiso's camp every year, and I would just pick up pieces and learn. And then I got a job at LIU Southampton, where I was the head coach for a couple of years after the Stony Brook experience. And then while I was at LIU, Tom Sabatel called and said, "Do you want to start a boys program? And do you want to do the girls program too?" And I'm like, "Absolutely, I could do that." So at that time, the boys were in the fall, the girls were in the spring. So for 12 years, I did both. And then, once the girls moved to the fall, then my wife took over that program, and I stuck with the boys. But again, for those Title IX women who made women's sports, possible, again, the Ann Dingham, the Fran Califer, the Maura Stouter, the Andy Porzio, the Eleanor Ekmans, all those, again, took this guy in. They liked when I trained their players because I was a little more fit and quick, and I could just push them a little bit more. So when I first started, I was a trainer, not a coach. And then I learned the difference between those two. I took my sneakers off, and I understood that, my job was to be the guide on the side, not the show. So yes, those women taught me.
Yeah, and you eventually, and didn't take too long to start experiencing success and county championships and all Americans and all county and all Long Island players that were just legit athletes. Obviously, every coach in that period benefited from the numbers, but you still had to manage the numbers, manage the talent, manage the skills and the positions. And volleyball, like any sport, there's very specific positions and very specific skill sets. You, by that time, knew the game as well as anybody, and you figured out the pieces to become, a championship coach. What point did you say, "Oh, I got this thing. This is moving well. Like, I feel confident, comfortable." You're managing both programs for over a decade. You're getting the talent. You're winning championships. Did you feel very comfortable at some point by like the mid to late 90s?
Well, to start, it was very hard. It was hard because you had a great football program, you had a great soccer program, and then you have to find athletes. Okay, so, and I don't know if that many people were that happy that we're starting another boys program in the fall because of cross country and again football and then soccer. So we had to get those athletes. And again, as far as feeling comfortable, I'm like I said, before we went on the air, I have a county championship game on Wednesday. I am still not comfortable. I am still like, oh my gosh, what do I need to do? Try to motivate these kids, try to teach these kids. And it's, I always feel you're always good as your last season. You're always as good, and you always have to kind of worry and grow. And, if I was the coach and if I had the knowledge that I know now, I would have a lot more county championships, and my record would be a lot better. And it's good. My record is good. But you have to keep on changing, keep on evolving. And as far as always, I never feel comfortable. Never.
Still coaching. You're coaching at Eastport. You're coaching at St. Joe's. Record's pretty good. Winningest coach in New York State history. It's pretty decent. The track record, or the journey and path, I should say, altered when the district reconfigured in 2004, and you went to Sachem East. And it's interesting. So did Rick Mercurio at the time. So I'm able to talk to some different folks, more of the modern era coaches, about that experience. And it's just a different world. Sachem is different today than it was 20 years ago, especially 30, 40 years ago. Enrollment continuing to do its thing and go down actually in the modern era, which is way different than the 70s and 80s. But you had this unique experience to jumpstart another program within Sachem. When did you make that decision to go there? What was that like? And you taught there and finished your career out there too, from a teaching perspective. So it wasn't like you just a coaching measure. Very interesting, I would say, to do that, sort of midstream.
Absolutely. If we stayed at one Sachem, okay, I have 11 county championships. I would have 16, 17. Just if I could take a couple players from North and a couple players from East, we would have been unstoppable. The first year of the split, both North and East were in the Final Four. So neither of us won, but put them together, we win easily. So there was so much craziness during the split, because you had the pro split people and then the people who weren't, and it was a hard divide. There was nobody on the fence. We are Sachem, we are, this is what our tradition is. And then other people were like, more kids will have opportunity, you won't be split sessions, or what I went through when I was in high school. And then when, pretty much I went to East because when it was North 11, 12 building and South 9 and 10 building, pretty much all of South, and that's the building I was in, went over to East. So the North people didn't want to go. They were comfortable. They were going to teach their 11 and 12-year-old classes. And we were excited that, now we're going to be involved in with seniors and juniors and proms and senior trips and all the activities that go along with that, getting ready for college. Instead of being, and a lot of people at South felt like we were the JV, and, North was the varsity. And, I could, looking back at it, especially with the population going down, seeing maybe we should have done something different, maybe. You never know what would be the best, but it was a different time. And then, my unified Sachem record is I won like 85% of my matches. And then, I was down to like 70% when we divided. It was tougher. It was difficult. And the idea is my kids were young too, so I wasn't putting in the same amount of time. So I blame that on me, where I should have been having more open gyms and doing more club stuff. So
I think every coach would agree. I mean, it's sheer logic. When you have a combined program, you're going to win more. It's just, that it's the reason why the Sachem success level was, light years above everybody else for about 30 years. When I explain that to people who maybe aren't from here, and explain the split and explore reconfiguration, however you like to phrase it, it's two worlds. And when you shatter what Sachem was, well, you can't necessarily get that back. And so the point of these conversations, and even just to mention it, is to explain, well, here's what we had, and here's how we're evolving. Now, do we ever get back to that? We'll see. It's one of those, I think, organically, if the community and society dictates it, Sure. But I don't think from a political perspective, anyone's going to say, hey, let's go and, go back to one. I think it has to happen organically, and let that history unfold on its own. It's interesting though, because, you also taught there. So you also did the academic side of it there. And that's interesting when you're starting a new culture, classroom culture, building identity, students trying to figure out who they are within a community that already had a reputation. Um, did you see the academics, that as being a challenge, or, you're in a classroom teaching, subject matter doesn't change, students don't necessarily change, and it's all the same?
It was different because again, we would, pretty much the whole school were ninth and 10th grade teachers. Now I was teaching senior electives and stuff like that. Um, as far as I think the teachers who came over, um, in the most part, were great teachers, and they, you know, took it upon themselves to learn the new curriculum and do what they always did. Try to excel in the classroom. I mean, another one of my, well, two of my mentors, Patty LeBlanc and Nancy Corso, when I first started, they took me under their wing and they showed me how to be a good teacher and what I needed to do in organization and writing lesson plans. Um, so again, as much pride as I have in my coaching, I have just as much, if not more, in my teaching. Steve Hackett, who was football coach and his kids went through Sachem, he put his kids in my class. And I'm like, you have this teacher and you have this. Why are you putting them in my class? These are like great teachers. And it's like, they're going to learn the same thing, but I want them to enjoy history. I want them to have fun. And that's why they're going to get the same grade, but they're going to enjoy it and they're going to learn to love it. And, whether it's coaching, learn to love volleyball and make it a thing that they can do and maybe coach and play afterwards. And in the classroom, that they enjoy coming to, Mr. Kropp's class and they have fun. And you know what? Hopefully I was able to do both. And, so as far as the difference, it was different in the fact that all of a sudden we have 17, 18-year-olds walking around the building instead of 13 and 14-year-olds walking around the building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never had you as a teacher, but I did have Patty LeBlanc in one of those godforsaken trailers behind South, and I remember you would hang out in her trailer. I guess I probably had her for student leadership or something at the time, and I was saying, "Oh, this guy's fun. This guy like totally has a different vibe than the other teachers," not knowing anything about you and not obviously knowing the relationship we would have years, decades later, but. My impression is always very, you enjoyed your job just from that glimpse of period of time that I had of you, which is great because you want teachers that love it, live it, and in your case, you lived it because you went through it. You went through those hallways, not necessarily the trailers, but the hallways. So,
Yeah. And like they say, if you enjoy what you do, you never work a day in your life. I've never worked a day in my life.
Yeah.
It's like I enjoyed, like when I retired, this is the big joke because people tell me I'm crazy. I retired with 434 sick days. And they're like, you're crazy. You should have taken those days. You didn't get paid for them. It's like, why would I want to not be there? Why would I not want to be where I was enjoying it and seeing the kids and watching them develop and being part of that? So it's, again, I don't regret one sick day I didn't take, one sick, day that I went in, or maybe I shouldn't have. Maybe I infected people. I don't know, but it's just what I loved, and that's why I love Sachem, and I have so much pride in what they do. Before every game, I mean, when I coach every game now, whether it's ESM or St. Joe's, I always wear a Sachem T-shirt underneath, just because I don't know why. So whether it says ESM over here on my pocket or it says St. Joe's, it's underneath. It's red, black, and gold.
That's awesome. I didn't know that, but that is the coolest thing. I love that. One thing I love about coaches like yourself that have been around for decades are the coaching trees. And more importantly, the coaching trees of alumni that you have coached that became coaches. and even more specifically, your past players that have now coached in Sachem and that have taken over the programs that you built, the Matt Riveras, the Matt DiStefanos of the world, and others. I think that's a really special connection, and I'm sure it means a lot to you. Can you talk about what that means to see your guys and girls, achieving great success for something that you built and they're carrying on the legacy?
No, absolutely. And the job that Matt Rivera and Desi Matt DiStefano did at North is off the charts. Last year, when ESM won the state championship and only lost one set, we tied the record that the 2014 Sachem North did when they were state champs, and that was coached by Matt Rivera and Matt DiStefano. I remember the first time when Matt DiStefano came out for volleyball. He was in ninth grade, and his older sister played, so he wanted to play. So I said, "What do you think you want to do? You want to be a setter, outside hitter?" And he said he wanted to be a bumper, and that's not a thing. But he was cute. He didn't know anything. He was a good athlete, and he just fell in love with it. And obviously, we know what's happened. With his coaching and his playing career, and the same thing with Matt Rivera. Matt Rivera, he came into SIA camp that I was running, and as a sixth grader, and went along. His brothers played, and then when he went to University of Maryland and came back, he wanted to coach and teach, and it's like, this is wonderful. Back in the day, one of my first teams, Evan Silverstein, he was one of the first inducted into Sachem Athletic Hall of Fame. He is the women's beach coach at University of Hawaii. So whether it's in Hawaii or on Long Island, I couldn't be more proud. And I see them, when if I'm recruiting for St. Joe's at these tournaments, and it's like, "Hey, coach, how you doing?" So it's very gratifying to know that you made these kids love the sport, that they wanted to continue, and hopefully continue the legacy of volleyball and continue it to grow.
And I don't usually ask about individual athletes because there's been thousands, people that have been really good, people still doing it. But Desi is, his own legacy now, and we know the story. It's tragic, and it's upsetting to even talk about. And it actually, I think about him every day. It impacts me every day when I look at my family and my kids, and I look at making sure to live in the moment at every single second, because he can't right now, but he's with us in spirit. But he was so in the moment when he was here, and his foundation now lives on. And, obviously it's difficult for people like you that were super, super close with him. I was a friend, and our kids played on the same hockey team, and I just respected him as a teacher and educator. But for folks like you that knew him so well, to see that, go through that, yet now carry him on in all that we're doing with the Desi Strong Foundation, it's just very interesting, but also special in a tragic way. Can you talk about what he meant to you, what he continues to mean to you in Sachem?
Yeah. Desi was my boy. I mean, I can't, whether it was, he was my neighbor also. And, we'd come over, we would talk, we would, when he wouldn't have gone to college if it wasn't for volleyball, because then when he did so well, and, in his junior and senior year, he was two-time county MVP, didn't lose a game. So college coaches recruiting. And then when he chose Mount St. Vincent, I would go and watch his games, there. And, whether it was going to his high school graduation party or his college graduation, or watching him play in college, or his surprise 30th, 40th, his wedding, his all the way through. And, when he came on board, the thing that made him different was his passion. And he would never do anything halfway. If he was going to do it, he was going to do it to the best of his ability and do and hit every aspect of what he needed to do, especially in coaching. He would have practices at North at 6 a.m, over the summer to have those guys work out. And then he would come back at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. to have the volleyball part of that. He is, again, he was a competitor. He was a leader. But he was the best of friends. Obviously there's an age difference. But you know what? Never failed that he would give me a call and say, just wanted to see how you were doing, check in with you, how's things going. Loyal as loyal can be. He would do anything for you. He would, shirt off your back. And he was fun. Once he got married and had his house, he threw the best parties. He lived life. Whether it's going to NCAA Final Fours, whether it's his passion for North Carolina basketball, he lived enough life to live to 100. He's just, again, I think about him every day too. And he was just somebody who is one of a kind, and there's nobody like Desi.
Well, I think there's nobody like you also, and you have had an impact on thousands of people in the classroom, on the court, at all levels. And how do you view yourself? Do you view yourself as having a legacy? How do you want to be remembered in decades from now, as you're still doing it, still living and breathing volleyball? But what do you want people to remember Bill Kropp as?
Just someone who cared. Am I proud that, I started the St. Joe's program? Am I proud that I started the boys volleyball program, whether it was the SIAG volleyball camp? This past year we were nationally ranked for a small commuter school that has no dorms, and I only can get local talent to be nationally ranked. It's the kids, it's my players. And, I just want them to know when they leave a program that, there's somebody who will always be there for them. Somebody who, if they ever needed anything, they could just pick up the phone or text me, and I'm there. And again, we talked about Desi, and it's kind of like he was. You just pick up the phone and he'd be there. So even though, like I said, he's quite a bit younger, you learn from him. I learned from everybody. And if you stop learning, you stop growing. So again, that's what I'd like to be known. Somebody who cared. It's about the relationships. And that's why I still do this.
Excellent. Thank you for the conversation. Thank you for everything you've done for Sachem. And I appreciate your time on this chat.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do. This is so important. So important that not what I said, but what everybody said, that people can look back, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, and see what a special place Sachem was, and hopefully still will be, because you just, again, I feel so lucky that I had the experience to work with the legends, the Mount Rushmore of Sachem coaching, and I didn't miss that. I saw, Jack Mahoney, and even the other coaches, the junior high coaches, all of them. My first football coach was Dennis Dragonette. Wonderful. And he had so much, influence in my life, just a great, great guy.
All right. We'll end it here. Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.